Hey guys, welcome back to my fantasy football podcast. We made it to week one. I'm super excited for week one. It actually started on Thursday, but week one, this Sunday slate starts tomorrow. So I hope you guys are excited. I'm super excited. And I'm going to talk a lot about tomorrow's slate in this video. But before I get to that, smash that like button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe so that you get all of my videos each Saturday talking about fantasy football before the Sunday slate so that you can set your lineup and make sure that you win your fantasy football matchup. And also, don't forget to check out our Patreon. Link is in our bio on TikTok and on Instagram. Go check that out because that's where I post my weekly picks, my weekly sits, rankings for each position, game day thoughts on the day of the game, and also answering your guys' questions, telling you guys who you should put in your lineup, and giving you guys individual trade advice when you message me over there. So definitely check that out. But for this video, it's going to be about 10 minutes long. I'm going to go into matchups I love and matchups I hate for this week, talk about some fantasy players in those games and if I like them or don't like them and why I think that. And then I'm going to end with some fantasy strategies for week one because you're probably like, oh, John, well, I mean, week one, we really don't know what's going to happen, but what are some strategies that I should, implement into my fantasy team? And I'll tell you the ones that I'm using for my fantasy teams this week. So without further ado, let's get into it. These are some matchups I love this week. I'll list them out first. I got 3 love and 3 hate, and then I'll go into each one in a little bit of detail. So the first one is the Chiefs at Cardinals. The second one is Raiders at Chargers. Third one is Eagles at Lions. So if you guys were here last year for these videos, you guys know that the games I love are games that I think are going to be high scoring. And if you have fantasy players in these games, try to get them into your lineup. But I'll talk about the individual players right now. So the Chiefs at Cardinals, I think that's going to be a pretty high scoring game. Actually, DeAndre Hopkins is suspended for the first 6 games. Zach Ertz is questionable. He might play, he might not play. We don't know yet. We'll probably know before the game Sunday. And then Rondale Moore, he's out for this game as well. So you got Hollywood Brown, you got hopefully Ertz plays, you got AJ Green there, James Conner out of the backfield. And then on the Chiefs side, it's the first time we're going to see the Chiefs without Tyreek Hill, so it's going to be very interesting. But I do think this game is going to be high scoring. I think at least one of the teams will get to the 30. So Mahomes, you obviously start. Same thing with Kyler, James Conner, you start. Kelsey, you're starting. It's those secondary players. I would try to start Ertz. You got to monitor his status going into Sunday morning. Try to start Ertz. Hollywood Brown, I would get into your lineup. AJ Green could be a deep sleeper if you're looking for a wide receiver in a 12-man or even a 14-man league for sure. Now, the second game, Raiders at Chargers, I also think that's going to be high scoring. I mean, it's also the first time we're going to see the Raiders with the new head coach, Josh McDaniels, so hopefully they come out and throw the ball a lot. Devontae Adams, Waller, Renfro, try to get them all into your lineup because, honestly, maybe one of them will not do too great, but for the first game of the season against a Chargers team that's going to put up a lot of points, it's tough to sit any of those players. So Jacobs, Waller, Renfro, Adams, try to get them into your lineup. Obviously, you're already starting Waller and Adams. And then on the Chargers side, definitely starting Herbert, Allen, Mike Williams, Eckler. I would expect a good game from them. It's going to be high scoring. Like I said, we know this AFC West is going to score a lot of points, so I like that game there. And then the third game, Eagles versus Lions. I think that's going to be a pretty high scoring game. And I think the Eagles obviously ran the ball a lot last season. Hurts is probably going to have a good game. A.J. Brown, get him into your lineup. Honestly, I also like Miles Sanders in this game. I know Hurts runs the ball a lot, but Miles Sanders, who had no touchdowns last season, can only have more touchdowns this season, unless he ties and gets 0 again, of course. But I think he'll get a couple touchdowns this season. Could get one in the first game. It seems like him and Gainwell are going to split time. Hopefully, Sanders gets a little bit more carries. I would put Sanders in. He's a solid RB2 this week for me. Now going into matchups that I hate. These are some matchups I don't think are going to be very high scoring, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of fantasy relevant players in these games. The first one, Patriots at Dolphins. Second, Saints at Falcons. And third, Giants at Titans. So the first one, Patriots at Dolphins, I don't think you're starting really any Patriots player. Maybe the only one is Damian Harris, but I probably wouldn't even start him. Hunter Henry is a tight end that you could start in a 14-man league, but I would try not to start him either. As far as the Dolphins goes, I probably wouldn't start Tua in this game unless I had to. If you're in a 2QB league or 14-man and that's really your only option, then that's fine. Tyreek Hill, you're starting. Waddle, you're probably trying to get into your lineup as well, but that's really it. I mean, Chase Edmonds, you could get into your lineup if you want. Him and Mostert are going to split time. Maybe Edmonds gets a 60-40 split there. But the Patriots against the run, have been decent. They didn't really let up a lot of rushing touchdowns to running backs last year, so I would be cautious about Edmonds as well. Obviously, if you don't have any options, I would rather start like a guy like Miles Sanders over Chase Edmonds, but Edmonds isn't too great of an option either. The second game, Saints at Falcons, I really think this is going to be pretty low scoring. I think the Saints are going to dominate this game. I have the Saints ranked as my number one defense this week, which you guys will see in my live show tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. But Drake London might not play. He's questionable. We'll find out tomorrow morning. And also, Kyle Pitts is playing, but I would be cautious about playing him. You're probably still playing him because you don't have many other tight ends. There's not a lot of great tight ends in the NFL in terms of fantasy. So you're probably still starting Kyle Pitts, but I would, lower your expectations for him because it's the Saints they're playing. They're probably not going to be able to move the ball down the field a lot. Saints have a great run defense, and Mariota only really has Pitts to throw to if London doesn't play. So be careful about that. As far as the Saints go, Michael Thomas, we don't know if he's playing. If he does play, Olave, I probably wouldn't start. Kamara, you're starting no matter what. And then the third game is Giants at Titans. This game's probably going to be low scoring. The Giants games are usually low scoring. The only players you're really starting in this game are Henry and Barkley, but I'm not really too high on Barkley because the Titans really did have a great run defense last year, so hopefully Barkley can get some catches out of the backfield if he's going to produce in terms of fantasy, but you're probably still starting him because he was probably your second-round pick. Henry, Barkley, that's about it. Tannehill, I wouldn't start. Robert Woods coming off a torn ACL, I probably wouldn't start in his first game back. A lot of people are talking about Tony or Shepard, Galladay. I'd like to see this offense run first. I'm not too confident in them. Let's just put Barkley and Henry in for now, and then we'll reassess both teams going into next week. And then I wanted to end off with some fantasy strategies, and these are a couple things that I'm implementing on my fantasy team after week one. And the first thing is don't overreact to week one. I mean, a lot of stuff is going to happen tomorrow on Sunday and Monday, and even a lot of crazy stuff happened on Thursday with Allen Robinson only getting one catch, Cam Akers getting 3 carries for 0 yards and 0 fantasy points. So a lot of crazy stuff is going to happen, and don't overreact. Don't be like, oh, my guy got 0 points, I got to trade him, I got to drop him, like, get rid of him, I can't have him on my team. Or don't be like, oh, wow, like, one guy did really good, like, he's going to have an amazing season. Don't overreact to week one. A lot of weird things happen. Let it settle for a couple weeks before you make too many crazy decisions on revamping your team. So after week one, don't go trading a bunch of players, and don't spend too much of your fab, your free agency acquisition budget, if you guys play with that in fantasy, because after week one, we really don't know who's going to be a big part of what offense. It's just week one. It's not a great indicator of how the season's going to go. So it takes time for these teams to integrate players into their offense. I mean, the Rams just got Allen Robinson. He only got 1 catch, and it looked like Stafford was only looking to cup. He had 15 targets on Thursday night. So I mean, it's going to take some weeks for Allen Robinson to get integrated in the offense, and I wouldn't be surprised if it took 4 or 5 weeks before Allen Robinson really put up some wide receiver 2 or even wide receiver 3 flex numbers. So be patient with Allen Robinson. I still think he's going to be a good wide receiver for fantasy football. The Rams just need to learn how to use him, and Stafford needs to get used to looking at him. And then the second thing is use other people in your leagues, use their overreaction to your advantage. So if somebody in my league has a guy that gets 0 points or gets like 5 points and he's expected to be a pretty good player and I believe in him, then maybe I'll trade for him. Because if the guy in my league has a guy that gets 4 points, he might overreact and be like, oh my gosh, I need to trade this guy. Like if he had Cam Akers or if he has somebody tomorrow that doesn't have a good game, he might be like, oh, I want to get rid of him. I want to trade him because he's not going to have a good year. Well, maybe take advantage of that. If it's somebody that you believe in that could have a good season, and week one is not a good indicator of how their season's going to go, then don't be afraid to trade for them, depending on what kind of value you're giving up. So, be conscious of the people in your league, and I always like to keep the conversation open with people in my league and, talk to them about how they think their team went and what their thoughts are on their players. Because if one guy on your team goes off and you're like, oh wow, I'm not expecting for him to have a great season, but he just had like 20, 25 fantasy points, you might be able to trade him for some good value after week one because people in your league will be overreacting to these high scores on week one and these low scores on week one. So manage your expectations for players, but also be cautious and be cognizant of the value that you're giving up and what you're seeing in these players and how they perform in week one, because there's a lot of volatility in week one, and we won't see how players are really going to be performing for at least a few weeks. So keep that in mind. But that's about it for what I had here. I want to keep these videos short and sweet and give you guys advice on some of the players I think are going to do well or not do well. If you guys have any individual questions on players you should start, like if you're going to start Jerry Jeudy or Courtland Sutton on Monday Night Football, or if you're thinking if you should start Adam Thielen or a guy like Brandon Ayuk because Kittle might not play. I mean, you guys can always ask me on the Patreon. Go over to the Patreon. Link is in the bio on Instagram and TikTok. And you guys can ask me all those questions. Or you guys can also go over to the live. Most of you probably know about my live. Tomorrow morning, 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Last year was at noon. I'm trying to get another 15 minutes out of it so I could answer more of your guys' start-sit questions. But basically, tomorrow, you got to be there for that. An hour and 15 minutes before game time. I'm going to be giving my weekly picks, my weekly sits, rankings for each position, and answering all of your guys' start-sit questions for the Sunday slate and Monday Night Football as well. So can't wait for you guys to be here all season long. Like and subscribe to this channel, and good luck in your first week of fantasy football, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.